UFC 314 just wrapped up, and I am here to tell you guys all about it, what just happened, and why Alexander Volkanovski is undisputed, not even questionable. He is the greatest 145-pound fighter that has ever lived. He has regained his belt and new, but really, and again, the featherweight champion of the world in the UFC. And he did it in some ways that I expected and others that I didn't. But that's not the only impressive performance. This entire card, guys, reminded me, and I think is going to remind you guys, of why you loved MMA in the first place. I've heard some rumblings across the last 6 months to a year about the sport maybe falling off, or having a bad run, or having a reset, or people are checked out. This was why you fell in love in the first place. Top to bottom, big time fights from the prelims to the main event. Let's go through it all. UFC 314, the breakdown. Let's go. Let's start it off with the fight to begin the preliminary card. Julian Arosa versus Darren the Damage Elkins. Now, Darren Elkins, 41 years old. This one was a little rough going into it, thinking that Darren really had any sort of a chance to win in the first place. And Julian Arosa, honestly, it took a lot longer than I even expected, because Arosa was pretty much doing whatever he wanted from the start of this fight until the eventual and disparagingly bad and almost saddeningly difficult end. Like, Darren Elkins looked like he shouldn't not only be in a UFC octagon, he shouldn't be fighting at all. He should barely be out and about the way he looked. And I don't mean that disparagingly. I just mean he's 41 years old. They called him the Damage because not only was he willing to give, but also receive damage throughout his career. His moniker was him winning fights by just surviving until another guy either gassed themselves out or they just punched themselves out, and he was able to make a big comeback, but he made a career off doing that, to what I would hope is its bitter end here, because Arosa kicked him from his back on the up kick, and it made Darren Elkins stumble for like the next 4 minutes. And I have great respect, obviously, for Darren Elkins, but it's just time now to completely, in my opinion, hang the glove up. Next, we move to Chase Hooper and Jim Miller. Now, I got a little squirrely in this fight, and I'm going to be honest, I did it a lot later in the card as well, but I was thinking Chase Hooper would win this fight. I picked him to win, but I was thinking, Jim Miller might have a chance by knockout. Listen, he's 41 or something like that as well, and his hands have never lied, and they still don't lie. They're still dangerous as all hell. They're like Shakira's hips. They don't lie so much, so when you get clipped by one, it's a dangerous night. And I thought potentially Jim Miller could present a dangerous problem for Chase Hooper. And also, let's not forget, Jim Miller is a high-level submission grappler, has submitted the likes of Charles Oliveira, who is considered the best submission artist in UFC history. I think he has the most submission wins in UFC history, so didn't think it was necessarily all but done for, even though, again, 41 years old, Chase, 25. What I saw in this fight was a more crisp on the feet Chase Hooper, even though he got touched. He got caught with some big shots from Jim. I saw a very slick and almost octopus-like Chase Hooper that we've seen for a long time now. When he gets a hold of you, the dude sticks to you like glue. He had 2 separate instances where he got the backpack position while standing and ripped the body lock, and it looked like he was going to shear Jim Miller's stomach off, how tight it was. And a couple of times he got, he threatened leg submissions. Jim Miller's just too high level to really be caught with anything at this point in his career on the ground, but ultimately a decision win for Chase. Then the Dan Ige Shawn Woodson fight. This one is peculiar to me for a lot of reasons. Number one, Shawn Woodson's build is straight out of the Alien movies. Like, he's built like a comic book villain, and I saw some tweets tonight that were just downright disrespectful about the man's build. One from Guru, who I'm pretty sure said someone needed to get rid of Shawn Woodson before he laid eggs. But anyway, as far as the fight was concerned, this was a good back and forth fight. Honestly, when I watched it, it looked like Shawn Woodson was winning the fight. He was controlling a lot of the striking exchanges with just, again, his freakish build and his length, and he was able to keep Dan Ige, who wants to get inside and throw big power punches, he was keeping him at bay for the most part. And honestly, I could have seen Shawn Woodson being up 2-0 heading into the third round. Apparently, the judges did not see it that way and had Dan Ige, all 3 of the judges, Dan Ige up 2-0 heading into the third round, even though he was being outstruck on the feet. He wasn't landing any takedowns. And again, the fight was really controlled at the distance that Shawn Woodson wanted to fight. So the scoring going into the third round was already bizarre. But something even more bizarre happened after, as Dan Ige landed a nuclear bomb and rocked Shawn Woodson and started to swarm him. And honestly, I think that Dan Ige probably could have and maybe would have stopped Shawn Woodson, had something not happen that was just egregious. And that is the stoppage from the referee at the mid part of this exchange that was going down. Shawn Woodson was hurt. Ige was swarming him. Shawn Woodson was tired, and because he was not only hurt, but it looked like a little bit tired, he shot on Dan Ige, which is number one, ipso facto. You are desperate. Things are getting bad. You have to do something to change what's about to happen. Dan Ige was probably going to finish him. He doesn't complete the takedown. Ige starts hammer fist to the side of the head. Woodson starts to rise to his feet, and the referee waves the fight off. Completely premature, in my opinion. Not even close to warranting the stoppage at that point. And immediately, Shawn Woodson, who's not out of the fight in any way, who's hurt, yes, but is still intelligently there, and he's not like out on his feet or anything like that, immediately throws his hands up like, what the hell was that? And he's right to do it because it was a completely premature stoppage. And I like Dan Ige. And again, he probably would have stopped Shawn Woodson here, but I just felt it was premature, and it's a little bit of a buzzkill when that fight was a good fight, but again, super just bizarre. And then we had the resurgence of Dominic Reyes. Yes, I picked Nikita Krylov here. And yes, this is going to be the start of the complete and utter buffoonery that is my picks for this card, so lock in. But Dominic Reyes and Nikita Krylov, this was, again, one of those fights where you looked at Nikita Krylov, long layoff. Dominic Reyes, not necessarily the highest level of competition since the John Jones loss and then the kind of spiral with the Yair loss as well. But he's come back to the UFC and he's come back looking sharp. This fight was over just as it began because Reyes right away took just a confident, commanding control of this fight. Again, there wasn't a ton of strikes given back and forth, but both guys knew that they were walking on eggshells because at any moment, when you hit the freaking welterweight division and up, people can end the fight like this. And you can even argue that for lightweight, but especially at light heavyweight. And Reyes performed after a couple of minutes of back and forth and some good strikes from both guys. I thought Reyes was getting the better of it. Krylov does a little bit of a blitz, tries to flurry while coming forward, throw the right hands, the left hooks, while leaning into range and running into range. Dominic Reyes performed his best Conor McGregor impression. Not the Conor McGregor we see today that's out doing this and accused of that and whatever else is going on with the man outside of the octagon. I mean the man that made you fall in love with the Mystic Mac, who said he was going to knock out Jose Aldo in one round, and he did so, stepping back and dropping the left hand on him. Dominic Reyes performed the same exact movement. I kid you not. Go back and watch it. It looked exactly like Conor McGregor's step back left hand versus Jose Aldo. He lands it on the button. Krylov goes down, a couple more hammer fists, and it's over. Dominic Reyes allows himself to be reintroduced to the light heavyweight division in the UFC. Honestly, everybody gets a little bit overexcited when these things happen and talk about Reyes versus Ankalaev, you know, like Reyes versus Poatan. I don't know that we go there yet, but he's 35 years old. And yeah, there's probably going to be a rush to push him back to the top of the division. The way he won this one especially, and the people were going nuts in the arena. They were going nuts online, and great for him because what a story to be at the top of the UFC light heavyweight rankings, to then find himself outside of the UFC, to then come back and win in this fashion again. He's ranked number 11 before this. I'm sure he's going to be in the top 10, potentially close to the top 5, and who knows? Who knows what his next fight is? Like, could it be an Alexander Rakic? Could it be a Yuri Prohacz? Could it be a Blachowicz? I don't know. Regardless, great win for Dominic Reyes. Next, we have, while people called the Paddy and Chandler the people's main event on the night, I think this one was probably right there with it. Bryce Mitchell and John Silva. This fight was so interesting because you could have picked your winner based on emotion. A lot of people siding with Bryce Mitchell because of the cold one-liners he was putting on John Silva before the fight. Some people siding with John Silva because of his backstory and his commitment to just, again, being himself in all facets when it came to this back and forth with Bryce, with building it, and just with the fans and the media themselves. Obviously, you got the fighting nerds as well who are behind John Silva, and I think their record's like 19-1 or something crazy. And then you had that argument of Bryce's experience, you know, fighting some of the top names in the division, and John Silva not having that experience. So those two things went into account as well. Ultimately, none of it mattered. The experience, the way you thought emotionally, none of it mattered. All it mattered is that John Silva is for real, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to tell you right now and say it again twice so you hear me correctly. He's for real. We knew he had the explosive hands. We knew he liked to be a little bit more of a showman in the octagon, and we knew he had big time potential, but we did not know that he was going to walk in there and play with Bryce Mitchell like he was a puppet. He played with him like a child. Like he literally played with him like a dog. No joke. He was barking and going crazy, and he had no fear, no threat of anything that Bryce could do to him. Bryce in this fight was just mesmerized by the amount of things that John Silva was able to do to him. Bryce tried to take him down. He was 1 for 14. It was like nothing. Like John Silva would just shuck him off like, get off me, child. You're not built for this. And in the striking department, Bryce had some moments where he would land some things and a nice hook here and a kick to the body there or whatever, but it just didn't affect John at all. And he would look over at Bryce's corner and laugh with him like, is this guy all you got? You better bring somebody else. And then he would try to touch gloves with Bryce, and Bryce was just not having it. And then John Silva would look over to like the president of the United States who was in attendance and talk to him for a little bit, or Dana was on there, or he was just in complete control while just being so loose and free, and he was landing big shots. But then I thought at first it was a standing Darce. It wasn't. It was more so just an inverted grip guillotine that he locked in, and Bryce went to sleep for a second. And John Silva in the second round wins by submission, stands over him, starts barking in his fucking face. And you just, you thought with a win, Bryce Mitchell was gonna catapult himself into a bit of a cult following superstardom because of all this stuff, with the Ark Insanity podcast and the Hitler talk. But I think that groundswell of support that Bryce had immediately got siphoned and fed into John Silva because he had that crowd on its feet. They were barking, ooh. And that to me is crazy. So he's going to get a fast track at featherweight. I don't know what's next for him. I forgot who he said he potentially called out, but there's so many names. There's so many matchups for him at that weight class. So I couldn't care less. Give me John Silva and Yair Rodriguez at this point. I don't know that that's anywhere possible or near happening, but I'm just thinking of stuff off the top of the dome based on what happened next. And speaking of what happened next, Yair Rodriguez and Patricio Pitbull, son. Patricio Pitbull debuting in the UFC after being a multiple division world champion in Bellator, who, yes, has never been thought of as the same level as the UFC, but does potentially have fighters and has in the past and even currently had fighters that have come over and done well in the UFC. Your Michael Chandler's, good debut. Michael Venom Page, good debut. And Patricio was thought up to be better than both of those guys combined. Like, he was a staple of Bellator MMA and potentially looked at as one of the greatest featherweights and lightweights walking the planet. Now, he is a little bit older now at 37, but it was mainly to me, when I picked Patricio, I wasn't sure about what Yair we would get. Because Yair Rodriguez, in the striking department, has the potential to be the nastiest striker on planet Earth, in my opinion. And that's not even singing super high praise for a guy that doesn't deserve it. Just go and look at the game tape. When he is on, he has some of the most deadly techniques known to man. And I think he threw all of them in this fight. He threw spinning wheel kicks. He threw the stomp kick. He threw the teep to the stomach. He threw the side kick to the stomach. He threw the hands upstairs. He threw the elbows as well. He had everything going, and he just looked like he was on a different level than Patricio Pitbull tonight. And I hope that you guys understand how ridiculous that sounds. But Yair made it effortless almost in this fight. He was deadly at range. He was devastating in close, and he just shut Patricio down completely. There were moments where Patricio could grapple, and I thought maybe more of that would give him a better chance, but it was just shut down city from Yair. And what I really liked was that Yair got on the mic afterward, and this is such an underrated thing for fighters to do, and he does it so well. He asked directly for what he wanted next. He said, there's a UFC card coming up in Mexico. I want to fight the winner of the main event for the belt in Mexico, in my backyard. And it was such a great thing because, as you guys remember, him and Diego Lopez already had beef going into this fight. So potentially you're thinking about a Yair and Diego Lopez, should he win the main event, matchup for the belt. I know that Mobzar is waiting in the wings and he's going to get the next shot, and he does deserve the next shot. I'm just saying, for the context of what we're talking about here and the call out nature, it was a good idea for Yair to do that off of that performance. And we'll get to another reason that's probably not going to be a good idea to make next for Yair and for the UFC in a little bit. But then we had the co-main event, and just as impressive to this point as I thought the John Silva fight was, I thought that was going to be the most impressive performance we'd see all night. I mean, Dominic Reyes, though, there were so many good ones, but I thought John Silva was going to steal the show with that performance, and I was wrong fucking twice. Because the co-main event featured Michael Chandler and Paddy Pimblett, and yes, hand up, I got it wrong. What's new? The Wade curse is real. The casual concept is here. Thank you and you're welcome. Just bet against me at this. But everybody and their mother seemed to ride with Michael Chandler for this fight for a couple of reasons. One, the experience of Michael Chandler's high-level losses. And I think now is where I stop putting stock into consistently losing to high-level fighters, because yes, it does prove that you're worth that level, but may not be worth the next level. So gatekeeper status potentially for Mike Chandler, and I think that's kind of where he's lived without us really thinking it over the last couple of years. But also, just because you don't have the experience level of a guy like Michael Chandler, of a guy like Bryce Mitchell, and their experience level is losing, doesn't mean you're not ready for the level. John Silva told us this. Paddy Pimblett tonight told us this. Hell, Ilya Topuria told us this against a winner in Alex Volkanovski, against a champion. He was ready before we knew he was. Paddy Pimblett was ready, ladies and gentlemen. I was on the boat of saying, I don't know if Paddy will ever be top 10, top 5 championship material. I'm off that bandwagon now. I'm jumping off with no parachute because I believe now. Paddy, I'm sorry. You are championship material in the UFC. I am fully invested at this point. The weight cuts, I'm there. The fat Paddy, I think, is gone. But even still, he looked fucking massive in this fight. And he did exactly what he said he was gonna do to Michael Chandler. I thought early Michael would be dangerous. And as the fight went on, by the way, a 5-round co-main event, they do this. I'm not exactly sure why they do this. I know that the fans like 5-round fights, but like in a co-main event with no belt, I don't know. It's something the UFC does. Is baffling to me. I hope that both guys got paid more because it was 5 rounds, but we'll see. But Paddy, on the feet, while being awkward, while having his hands super low, was tagging Mike with jabs, with right hands, with hooks. He was standing there doing exactly what he said. He goes, listen, Mike's going to have an overhand. He's going to have a jab. It's not going to be enough. I'm going to pepper him with jabs. I'm going to hurt him. I'm going to crack him. I'm going to take him down. I'm going to hurt him there. And eventually in the fight. And that's what he did. I thought Mike looked old. I'm sorry. I thought he did. I thought he looked lost a little bit. At one point between rounds, Michael Chandler looked at Henry Hoof. Can't remember what Hoof said to him, but essentially it was like, I want you to step over. And I think he was trying to get him to step into a right hand, the overhand that Mike wants to throw, and he just looked at him and said, he's too far away. I can't get to him. And Paddy was doing a great job with his kicks as well, the teeps up the middle, keeping Chandler at a distance that Paddy felt comfortable, even while, showing some of that awkward kind of low hand stance that he does. It was effective, and it was effective continuously to the point where finally, when Mike decided, okay, like I'm getting beat here pretty bad, you started to see it weigh on him a lot more in this one, where he would survive into later rounds and fights with Charles Oliveira and others. He did look a bit weathered here, and it did look like his gas tank was shot after about a round and a half. And even here, Paddy Pimblett's corner talking about it, like he's gassing quickly here. Paddy didn't even take the stool. He's sitting there like he was barely tired at all. It didn't look like he was tired at all. And again, the second round where Mike was starting to tail off, Paddy was starting to get going more, especially with his striking. And I thought he won that round going away. And then we had the third round where Mike was at that point, it looked like grasping at straws a little bit. He was frustrated, couldn't get to Paddy, couldn't land his significant strikes, couldn't land the big shots. And because of all that, and you heard the corner work talking about, we gotta look for the overhand. I need you to step over, step in. He did that. He overexerted, and Paddy caught him with a big time knee and drove Mike backwards. He got cut on the eye. It was brutal. It was gruesome. Paddy started walking forward and found Mike on the cage, picked him up, threw him down on the ground. He just looked so much bigger and stronger than Mike Chandler. Imagine saying that. Someone looked stronger than Mike Chandler. Paddy did. When he got on top of him, he started hammering just 12-6. Just big time elbows from the top, and eventually gets the stoppage. And a performance that I did not expect. If anybody would have told you Paddy by KO, fair play to him, because I did not have that on my bingo card. That was a performance that shut up a lot of MMA online about not just this fight, but about Paddy in general, about his trajectory, about his ability to rise as a contender, a real contender at 155. Because before this, it's been the controversy with Jerry Gordon, it's been the lackluster performance versus Tony Ferguson, and the pleasantly surprising performance versus Bobby Green. But this right here, this performance versus Mike Chandler, who, yeah, okay, Charles the first time did that to Mike Chandler after, Mike hurt him, but he didn't dominate Mike that way. Gaethje took him to a decision. Oliveira, again, with the decision the second time around, but I don't know, it just felt like you put Paddy Pimblett in the pantheon of big-time fighters at 55 right away. And on the mic, again, fair play to Paddy. Called them all out again. He said, yeah, me versus Charles is the fight. He's got the most submission wins in UFC history. I consider myself a great grappler. Let's run it. He called for Justin and Dustin and even, as he said, Posh Boy Arman Sarukian, which again, I love all the fights, but it seemed like there was a little bit of extra venom there for Arman, so sure, even though I don't think they're going to, I think Arman's probably going to get, a shot at the belt at some point, but still, I would like it. Dustin Poirier, even though I've heard he's rumored to fight Max Holloway in a retirement fight. And then you have Justin Gaethje, who's also potentially looking at a title fight. Regardless, whoever they don't pick, set him up with Paddy. He's ready for this moment. And honestly, again, I didn't think I would be saying this about Paddy Pimblett, but I'm starting to believe that Paddy is ascending to championship level. Does he win the belt off Islam? I'm not going to go that far to say that, but I'm not ruling out a championship appearance from Paddy Pimblett in early part of 2026 if he keeps going like this. He's going to need one more big win. If he beats Charles Oliveira, I think you put him in a title fight. If he beats Justin Gaethje, I think you got to put him in a title fight. If he beats Dustin Poirier, he may need one more after that. But if he beats Arman Tsarukyan, you put him in a title fight. So one more. And if Paddy can get it done, we could be looking at a Paddy Pimblett title run in early 2026. And then we get to our main events of the evening. And again, I will own up to it. I picked against the main event. The Wade curse exists, yada yada. Casual concept, let me know in the comments. But Diego Lopez taking on Alexander Volkanovski. That's right, Alexander the Great Volkanovski. Widely considered to be already the best 145-pound fighter ever. Already multiple title defenses at 145. You know the story. 3 wins over Max Holloway. You get it. But coming off 2 bad losses, 2 bad KOs. One at 145, one at 155. 2, to be fair, against Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev. But again, there's that idea of losing versus the best. As you get older, does that equate not having the experience at the highest level for a game fighter like Diego Lopez? Well, we found out this time it did, because this fight started and you got vintage Alexander Volkanovski. You got him circling away from the power hand of Diego Lopez. You got the low kicks, you got the teeps, you got the jab, you got the feints, you got the movement, and then you got a little bit of the nasty Alexander Volkanovski, because you knew in this fight, Diego Lopez's best chance to win was to push forward and rough Alexander Volkanovski up and get him to exchange. That was the goal, I assume, from everybody's outside view and also his corner. You're going to have to get Volk to exchange instead of allowing him to pick you apart. Because if he's able to pick you apart, he's going to beat you. The guys that got him to exchange and made him pay for it, Topuria and Islam, even though Islam with the head kick, that was just a nasty head kick. They made him pay for it and they beat him. Diego Lopez had to do the same with maybe not necessarily the level of skill and experience to do that. And that's what we saw in this fight. Even though Diego Lopez, let me tell you something, that chin is made of metals that aren't discovered here on Earth. I'm telling you right now, because Volkanovski, like I said, he was picking and poking from the outside, but then he decided to get a little nasty and step into some shots. And in the pocket, they would trade, and Alexander Volkanovski would win. He would win exchanges, overhands, left hooks. He was battering Diego Lopez, and as soon as Diego would get hit, he would just go, yeah, bring that shit. And I was like, oh my God, the man's chin is made of adamantium. Because he was taking overhands to the jaw and just like, cool. Jabs, walk through it. Left hook, I will say, early in the fight, a left hook clipped Diego, and it almost felt like that moment became a little too big. When he got clipped with the left hook, he went, oh, okay, I'm not invincible. But then regained that invincibility throughout the fight, because while Alexander was winning the first round, we go to the second, and he's winning the entirety of the second round, battering Diego Lopez. I mean, the significant strike difference already in the second round was widening. The gap was wider than your mother's. Never mind. Diego, just taking shots, walking into range, finally decides to push forward with a double jab right hand and cracks Alexander Volkanovski not only off his shoulder to the temple, but partially blocked by the shoulder to the temple. And he puts Volkanovski on the mat. This was one of those moments you went, oh my God, is he just going to steamroll through all this work that Volk has done? The great performance to start the fight and be able to walk him down and put power on him like Ilia Topuria did. But fair play to Volkanovski. He pops back to his feet. He survives a bit of a flurry there from Lopez, even starts to swing with him again, and the round ends. And the next couple of rounds, while Diego Lopez, he put on a great performance for him. He got hit way too much here. His head was on the center line. He was almost inviting punches, which again is a strategy in its own right to say, listen, this is the only way I can win. Skill for skill, I'm not going to beat this guy on the outside, so I have to invite him, goad him in to exchanging with me. But even in the exchanges, he was getting pieced up. 3, 4, and 5. Honestly, I had this as a 4-1 win. You could even say 5-0 skunk for Alexander Volkanovski, and I called it a masterclass on Twitter because that's what it was. The only part of the fight I thought he lost, or parts of the fight I thought he lost, were a couple of the exchanges, like the one where Diego Lopez knocked him down. There was another where Diego cracked him, hit him with a jab, kind of blinded Alex in the lead eye. He ducked, and Diego Lopez cracked him with an uppercut as Volkanovski landed an overhand and pushed him into the cage and tried to follow up. But even in those moments, Volkanovski found a way to circle, get back to where he was comfortable, and get the fight back on his terms. But the exchanges were won by Alexander Volkanovski, and what shots landed more cleanly, more often, Diego Lopez would trade like 6 or 7 punches for one, which is in his nature, right? His strikes given versus strikes taken per minute is a 4-4 even rate, where Volkanovski's like 6-3. So that made sense. I will say, again, Diego Lopez stuffed damn near every takedown from Volk, kept the fight on its feet, and tried to walk Alex down in moments. I felt he needed a little more volume. I felt he needed a little bit more forward pace versus just waiting on Volk to start the action and then trying to counter. I hope that Diego will take from this fight that he can't just get punched in the face continuously and expect that to allow him to gain range. He does need to implement some head movement and start the exchanges with his jab and potentially some kicks as well in there. But again, a solid showing for Diego Lopez. He was game the entire fight. But outside of that, potential devastation based on the fact that Diego was willing to take punches to get to range. Volkanovski controlled this fight. He landed almost 100 more significant strikes, which is insane to say, but it's true. And showed me and a lot of people that Volk still got a lot left in the tank. He may be the first fighter under 170 pounds to win a belt after the age of 35. That's super impressive in its own right. His post-fight speech was amazing, talking about how adversity is a blessing and how to overcome something like that, you don't get that feeling anywhere else in life when people count you out and you're able to overcome it and prove a lot of people wrong. He did that here. And, what's next for Volkanovski? Again, you have Movsar waiting and ready for that title shot. And probably, if you look back on this after, beating Diego Lopez, rightfully probably should have gotten the title shot next. So Volkanovski and Movsar next up. I'm with it. I'm down for it. Yair Rodriguez creeping his way back to the title. Again, that fight went Volk's way almost entirely the first time around, but we know with things happening the way they have and how Yair is back on a winning streak, his offense is so fucking deadly. It's just more about, can Yair protect himself from the grappling exchanges, because Volk is a complete MMA fighter. I don't care if he's 35, 75, Lakers in 5. That man can still fight at an elite level, not just with the hands, but he's got the takedowns, he's got the grappling, he switches them up beautifully, and just what a performance, and what a night of fighting. This card is what you love about the UFC. When they can stack a card like this, and they had the who's who, let me tell you. Trump was there, that looked like the whole freaking Republican Party was there, all the celebs were out, and this card delivered. The names, the fights, the performances. This is why we fell in love with the UFC, and this is why I am back to covering it, because damn, I love this shit. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments what you thought about UFC 314, and I will see you on the next one, because what happens next for Alexander Volkanovski, for Paddy Pimblett, for Yair Rodriguez, for Dominic Reyes, for John Silva, for Marco Tulio, I don't have those answers, but UFC feels back. So, guess we'll find out.